Well, good morning. Thanks for starting your Sunday morning with us. This is the 60th anniversary for TV6, and this morning we'll take some time to look back. Our guest wasn't there at the beginning, but I'm certain he spent more time on the air than anyone in the history of the station. We'll start that conversation right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, normally I start the interview with some background information about our guest, but the person I'll be talking with this morning needs no introduction, especially here on TV6. Our guest is Steve Asplund, and I thought that this morning we could get to know the guy by talking to him a little bit about his background and also exploring some of his memories during a long career here at TV6. Steve, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thank you, Don.
And you're in a different position now. I'm asking the questions and you're providing the answers.
It is a little odd that we're on opposite sides of the desk here. Usually it's the other way around.
But at least we're on the same side.
Same team, yep.
Same team. Let's get to know you a little better.
Okay.
You know, obviously people know who you are, but they may not know that you, for example, grew up in the Milwaukee area as a kid.
Yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee. I went to school there and went to college in Milwaukee as well. And then when I finished my education and so forth, I applied for a position to come up here. So a lot of what I know was from the Milwaukee area, Wisconsin, and most of my life now has been spent in the UP.
You also did some interesting jobs while you were working your way through college and growing up as a teenager. I think you actually worked at a McDonald's for a while.
I did. I started out at Boy Scout camp working as a counselor there, and then I went to worked at McDonald's. After McDonald's, I then ended up driving a semi and delivering Golden Guernsey milk for the Milwaukee area for grocery stores, and then drove for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the newspapers around the state, did some radio at the public station at the university, and then obviously graduated from college and then applied for positions, and that's how I ended up at TV6.
You went to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Correct.
At some point you got married. Was that early in during your college years or after? Or?
Oh, that happened after I was here at TV6
okay.
for a number of years. Then I started that long distance romance between here and Milwaukee.
Okay.
And my wife Ann, she's from the Milwaukee area as well.
And you raised two children?
We have two children. They're doing very well. One's in outside Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the other one is in Brooklyn, New York. So a little adjustment for her going from Negaunee as a youthful person and then moving to New York City and experiencing that.
Let's talk about how you wound up here.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, people coming out of school at that point, there's an interim step of maybe working at a radio station.
Right.
But you managed to skip that step.
Yeah, in college they would tell you, say, well, you have to pay your dues. You go to radio and become a radio news person working there, and then eventually you'll be able to move into television. And I thought, well, okay, that's what I did, so I applied at several radio stations, had offers from there, and then I also sent it to a few dozen TV stations in Wisconsin and here in Upper Michigan, and I ended up getting a call from TV6 here, and I said, sure, I'll come up and do an interview. So I ended up coming up here in June of 1979.
And I remember from talking to you that was kind of an exciting day, wasn't it?
It was great. You know, I started out early in the morning driving up here, came all the way to Marquette, and then I changed clothes at Burger King in Marquette. In their bathroom, I changed into my suit and everything so I'd look really sharp when I came out for the interview in that afternoon.
But there was no one here, was there?
No, that's the funny story, because I came here for my interview, met the receptionist, and I said, my name's Steve Asplund, I'm here for an interview with the news department, and she kind of looked at me kind of like, oh okay, kind of said, well, I'll be right with you, and then I sat down in the lobby there, and she went back to the newsroom and came back and said, there's nobody in the newsroom. And I'm going like, oh, well, I'm sure I'm here on the right day, and are you sure? She goes, I'm positive there's nobody back there, because the newsroom back then was about 6 people.
Sure.
And what ended up happening, I ended up learning that the ore carrier, the Frontenac, was on fire off the Keweenaw Peninsula, and everybody in the newsroom was fanned out across the area to go up there and cover the story. And so I was sitting in the lobby, and eventually they got a hold of John Williams, who was the news director. He ended up saying, like, well, send Steve down to the Holiday Inn and have him spend some time there, and then we'll call him later.
Okay. And you got to do an audition, and even that was a little screwed up, as I recall.
They say, like, oh, quick, can you come out and do the audition, you know, on the set? And I said, oh, sure. And in those days, you had no teleprompter, and they were all rushed because it was a quick type of audition between shows and so forth. So they gave me the script, and I'm looking it over, and they say, "You ready?" I'm going like, "Oh, of course I'm ready, sure." I start reading it, and none of the pages match each other. And then I realized after I finished that, and they came out and they said like, "Oh, you didn't do so well." I'm going like, "Yeah, I know." He says, "It's our fault. The pages are all messed up. None of them are in the correct order." And I'm going like, "Oh, thank goodness."
And people have to appreciate as you're going through this whole day. You're just a young guy
Oh,
looking
yeah.
for your first job. You're not a seasoned veteran expecting all of these things to go wrong.
No, you're expecting a smooth type of transition into a working environment here at the station, and having not been around television news or in the TV station at all for that matter, it's all foreign to you. So you kind of thrown into the fire, so to speak, at that point.
Well, let's talk about what it was like being a new. This is 1979.
79, right.
First of all, I think people even dressed differently back in those days.
Well, yeah, I had a houndstooth coat with a white turtleneck, and that was my suit coat and clothing at that time, and that was the standard. You had the longer hair,
Right.
the sideburns and so forth. And back then, we started out with a small staff. I think there were 7 of us on the whole news staff back then. And as a result, I ended up being a reporter, but we were shooting in 16 millimeter film. So there were a whole different set of rules for shooting film, because you had to be back to the station at a certain point in which to get the film processed and then put it together for your story. And so I was doing that for several months, and then they came to me and said like, well, because I always said I'd expressed an interest in doing the anchoring, and they said like, well, we have an opportunity for you. And I said, oh, what was that? And they said, well, we'd like you to co-anchor the news and do the weather. And I said, I've never done the weather before. He goes, you'll learn.
I've been there and done that. We'll talk more about that, and we'll talk about some other things as well as about TV6 during our 60 years with Steve Asplund as the Ryan Report continues. Well, this is the 60th anniversary of TV6. We're talking with Steve Asplund, sharing some memories. Let's talk about that. We started a little bit, but how news really evolved, because when you started, as you mentioned, you were working with film.
Right.
Which really put a lot of restrictions on what you could do.
Yeah, I mean, when you're shooting film, you take like a regular 35 millimeter picture, you take one shot and that's it. So with film, everything you shot was used once and only once. When you get videotape, you can reuse the same picture or same video over and over again. So with film, you had to take so many feet or so much film for your story, but at the same time, they say don't use too much because that's expensive to process.
Right.
So you were caught between the rock and a hard place on that.
And then the editing was a slow process too.
Yeah, we had tape editing here. There's such thing as glue editing or glue splicing.
I was in the glue editing.
I was in tape, so you put a tape on one side, flip it over, and tape the other side, and then you put it on a big reel. And they had to string the stories in the newscast in the order they were, because they went up on the film projector that way, and that's how they played.
But the whole idea, of television was to get visuals, and so the coming of videotape really made a huge difference.
Oh yeah, I mean, videotape was to the point where you could walk in the back door with the videotape, put it in a machine and play it, and then you could edit up something very simplistically in probably a matter of 5 minutes. And that really changed the whole makeup of what television news was, because it was more immediate.
Although videotape then was not as neat and easy as it is now.
It's kind of clunky back then, now back then it's linear editing, what they called it, which was tape to tape, actually tape to tape physically. With what we have now is non-linear editing. It's all computerized, so it's almost instantaneous. So you put in the SD cards, which are about that big, and instantly they got the pictures in your computer, and you just drag them down, put them on the timeline, and off they go, and they're playable right away.
It's such a different world. When I started, we had pictures. That was
still pictures.
Still pictures. That was pretty much our video. Yeah, and I was also thinking that news bureaus, there were no news bureaus back in those days.
No.
It was all done here from Marquette.
And you probably remember the bunny bread truck days, where you had somebody, Cash Malkowitz, I believe it was.
Yes, yeah.
He was shooting film in Escanaba, I believe, somewhere like that. And he said, I shot an accident. It's on the bunny bread truck. You'll get it in the morning.
Right.
And nowadays we have bureaus in Escanaba, Houghton, and in Iron Mountain.
Right.
And those reporters live and work there, so the access to spot news or breaking news at that time is a lot more convenient. And then through the use of microwaves, cable, and also FTP sites, that video is sent right to us immediately.
Which brings up another point, and that is, you know, for years, you know, I was trying to find a way when I was here to do the regional basketball tournaments live.
Mm-hmm.
We finally figured out a way by working with NMU that we could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the evolution to where you can now do remote broadcasts is
Oh,
just,
yeah.
for me, it's flabbergasting.
It is, because you used to have a trailer basically to do it with huge cameras to make that happen. And now it's down to the point where it's about the size of this desk, and that is your entire unit as far as broadcasting, plus cameras that you know, people have these days. You can have them as small as your hand, and you can do the whole remote live.
Yeah, that's really been an evolution. You do live shots every day in the news and in the early news and morning news for sure.
Right, and it's all cell phone based. You know, it's not even microwave anymore. It's just a cell tower. So wherever you have cell phone service, you're able to do a live shot.
The other thing that's really expanded is the amount of news, isn't it,
Mm-hmm.
that you're providing now?
Well, in your day, it was what, 15 minutes or 30 minutes for the day?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much. Now we're doing upwards of 20 hours a week. You know, every day we do like 2.5, 3 hours of news each day. And that incorporates a lot of people that you see both in front of the camera, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that make that happen.
I think our employment here at TV6 is about 60 right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the news department itself is
28.
28.
Yeah.
But there are also production people who have a major role to play in getting that news on the air.
Mm-hmm.
So really over half the staff is devoted to news programming.
It is, and that's a big part of what TV6 is. I mean, we're the group or the department that's out in the public. We're the ones that are visible on a regular basis, and we cover the community's activities, events, as well as the news that happens throughout the day, throughout the Upper Peninsula.
Okay. And one of the, well, we'll talk more about, I was going to say one thing that's also changed is the number of news cars. I know we had one when I was here, and I'm not sure how many when you arrived.
Oh, there was like 4 news cars, and they all had really high mileage.
Yeah.
Now it's changed quite a bit, and they're traded out quite often.
And people are on the go all the time.
Yep, we still drive as much as we always did because the coverage area hasn't shrunk, so we still go Ironwood to Newberry,
Right.
you know, Copper Harbor down to Menominee, so it's quite an extensive area.
We'll share some more memories after we take a break. Back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. And we're talking with Steve Asplund this morning, talking about some memories from the past. You know, really, technology has changed everything, hasn't it?
It certainly has. I mean, you've gone from, like I mentioned earlier, 16mm film all the way up to what is nonlinear and basically SD cards as far as capturing video. It's gone from, you know, capturing film-wise just what you need to almost you can shoot continuously, and you can always go back and erase it or never have to use it.
And of course, it's in other parts of the business too. I can remember in the very early days, you know, there were probably 10 or 12 engineers on the staff, including
Right.
some who would have to sit at the transmitter up on Signal Hill whenever the station was on the air.
Yeah, everything has changed. Everything's more compact, everything's quicker, there's a lot more automation and everything. In fact, here at the studio, we don't even have camera people anymore. It's automated
Right.
cameras in the studio.
Right. That's really a major change. Let's talk about a couple of things. First, maybe some memorable people that you would think about, and I know there are hundreds.
Oh man, there's been so many people that have come through here. You know, the people in the beginning, the Jamie Guth, who now works for the World Health Organization in Switzerland, Lorene Zenokoski, who's in Marquette and retired now from the diocese. There's a lot of great people that have gone through the years that have gone on to great things in the business. You know, everywhere from Orlando, Florida, New York City to out in California, where they have gotten jobs in the industry and still do very well. There's, in fact, 3 people that worked in the Iron Mountain Bureau, all work in the Houston, Texas market,
Really?
at 2 at the same station, which is kind of odd in that regards. But there have been so many great people, and they've gone on to do so many great things.
There have been several, at least, people who started here and were local who have moved on and did well in other markets.
Oh yeah, I mean, you mean in regards to like a Scott Fury or
Scott Fury, Scott Garso,
Scott Garso, who went out west and then went to Baltimore.
up in Baltimore. I think Carol Anderson.
Carol Anderson is in the Greenville, North Carolina or
Somewhere
something.
down there.
She's down in that area there.
And even more recent vintage, Jerry Hume is down in Florida.
Jerry Hume's in Orlando. You know, he loves Disney World, and he got his wish, and he works out of that area now.
And I know you enjoyed the years you worked with Ed Carney. Ed,
Yeah.
interesting guy who started as a cameraman and wound up as news director.
He did. He came right through the ranks here. He did everything. He knew just about everything in the building that you could possibly do. A rather creative guy in regards to covering news, and he just had a real sixth sense about the whole thing, and really. And he was a lot of fun. You know, that's what I always subscribe to, is that if you're not having fun in what you're doing, it really turns into a job and a burden.
Right.
And he made it a lot of fun, and the experience of working here was enjoyable throughout, even though you worked hard, worked long hours.
Yeah. And certainly we could spend a whole program talking about memorable stories when you
Oh,
cover
yeah.
the whole UP, but the Dead River flood has to be one that really stands out.
It does. You know, it was just a normal evening the night before, and then all of a sudden, the reports came in that the water was going up on the basin, and as that happened and moved forward, you know, we all kind of like, oh, okay, it's just something minor, and then overnight we learned that the dam at Silver Lake had broken, and the water was starting to come out in large fashion, and that progressed throughout the day, and so the basin rose. It came all the way down to Lake Superior, obviously, through Tourist Park and so forth. And I was in a position at that time that Ed Carney was the news director, and we did one of those like when I came here. Everybody left the newsroom to go and cover it.
Sure.
So I was down at the Hoist Basin. I was down on by the McClure Dam with the pontoon boat going over the McClure Dam. I went down to Tourist Park and watched the water come through around the cement dam and take the earthen part of the dam out. And then you see the bridge down on Lakeshore Boulevard was wiped out by the debris and so forth. It was just an amazing scene, you know. And you go to like Tornado Alley and other areas where there's devastation and stuff. They see that regularly, but in the UP you don't get that, and that was really left a mark.
And you actually shot some video of probably the most memorable shot from that whole episode of a pontoon
The
boat.
pontoon boat going over. I waited for like an hour for that to go over. And what was amazing is there was like 6 people on the shoreline that could have easily just thrown a rope and pulled the boat back. But none of them did for whatever reason, and it just kind of floated out, got into the current, and it just went straight over the dam. And they used it on nightly news that night as well.
Having K.I. Sawyer here made a difference too, didn't it? You got
Yeah.
some great stories as a result of
Yeah,
that.
K.I. Sawyer, I loved going out to the air base. I thought there were great people out there. Everybody was very kind. I got to do a number of stories on a regular basis. I flew on a B-52, a KC-135. I got to fly with the Thunderbirds, which was, you know, unbelievable.
Right.
So the opportunities are limitless. I mean, this job gives you that kind of access that you're able to do those type of things.
And you know, you're covering tragedy,
Yeah.
joy, just every emotion.
You do. You run the gamut all the time, but the thing that kind of grounds you is just the people that you're around here with at the station working, but more importantly, the people you meet out in the public. I mean, they're great people, they got great stories, and everybody's got a story of their own that's worth telling.
We only have about a half a minute left.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously could have left here many times. Why
Yep.
did you decide to stay?
You know, I stayed here for lifestyle, and that's what I tell people. It's a great place to raise your kids. It's a great place to live. You know, as far as recreation, I can go out my back door, and within 5 minutes, I'm at ski trails, bike trails, kayaking, whatever I want to do. And the people have really made a difference. The community, the people in the Negaunee, and throughout the Upper Peninsula, they really make it feel like home.
We've only scratched the surface. There
Yeah.
are so many memories we could share, but this is a special year, so it's
Yep.
good to get together and have an opportunity to do that. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure.
Okay, maybe we can do it again sometime.
We can. We will do that.
Okay, we're both here, so
That's why not.
I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. Well, since today is about TV6 memories, let me share one more. Many years ago, after working for TV6 on a special part-time project, I felt the door was open to apply for a job, and the station's general manager, Jim Tomlin, agreed to talk with me. The interview went well, so he arranged an audition. I remember feeling reasonably confident about my proposal, my performance that is, and apparently the people who were judging it felt the same way. My starting date was August 30th, 1965. My initial salary was $120 a week, with the promise of an increase to $125 in the spring. That doesn't sound like much money now, but it was worth more back then, and I didn't care. I would be working in TV. When I showed up on my first day, I didn't even know what I was going to be doing, so I asked Jim Tomlin, and he said, "You'll be doing the news and weather." I was a little stunned, since those were usually two separate jobs, and I knew nothing about doing weather. But I was certainly eager to try. I've occasionally wondered since then what kind of a plan they had if I had not applied for the job. The previous weather guy was already gone, and the news anchor was about to leave. I can only assume they auditioned some other people and chose me. When you start out working at a small 250-watt radio station and one day find yourself at a full-fledged television station, you think you've hit the big time. The radio station had 6 or 8 employees, while TV6 had 40 or 50 when I arrived, and they were all working in a new modern building. Working at TV6 was very different when I first got here than it would be when I left 9 years later, or than what it would eventually become. When I started, the entire news department had 3 people, and a couple of us had other general announcing duties besides. Those of us working in the news department took our jobs pretty seriously, but that professionalism didn't extend to everyone. The studio cameramen were all young people, including some college students, who thought it was fun to try to break up whoever happened to be on the air. Thankfully, those days are long gone. Today, I look back at the time I spent working here during those early years as the launching point for my entire career. Working in broadcasting was always my dream as a kid, and in some ways I've always been a broadcaster at heart. Even though the jobs I held after that were very different, the experience I gained here served me very well. That's why I was so very pleased as the end of my working years approached to be able to come back where it all started. For me, TV6 really has been someplace special. I'll be back in 2 minutes. I hope you enjoyed our reminiscing about TV6 this morning. Steve Asplund has been covering the Upper Michigan news scene for a long time, and he has some great memories about TV6 and the communities in the Upper Peninsula. Keep in mind that if you want to watch the show again or recommend it to someone else, it will be available at uppermichigansource.com. Each week's show is usually available starting on Monday afternoon. You can also find previous episodes at that same web address. The Today Show is about set to roll. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope we can look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.